Today on Adversity to Strength, I'm joined by Sarah Michelle Boas, nurse practitioner, entrepreneur, congenital heart disease activist. After more than a decade of oncology, intensive care, and nursing education, Sarah founded SMNP Reviews, which grew into a seven-figure business in just 7 months and was later acquired by Blueprint Test Prep. But behind the business success is a deeply personal story. Sarah's daughter, Meadow, was born with severe heart defects requiring extensive care, and inspiring Sarah's commitment to pediatric cardiac research and advocacy. Alongside this, Sarah has been open about her own struggles with anxiety and OCD, which fuels her mission to promote mental health awareness, especially in high-stakes fields like healthcare. In this conversation, Sarah shares how she turned pain into purpose, balancing family adversity, personal challenges, and professional success while helping others find strength in their own journey. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to share about my story and especially my daughter Meadow.
Absolute pleasure. Take us back to the beginning of your journey. Where did it all start for yourself?
When I was thinking, as we were about to start this episode, about where I wanted to start, I was actually thinking about being in nursing school. I feel like a lot of my journey really starts there and figuring out how I wanted to manage my mental health and what that was going to look like for me as an adult and a human. When I was about halfway through nursing school, I had a panic attack during a clinical, and it was the first public panic attack I'd ever had, but it was definitely not the first panic attack I had ever had. And so something that was very deeply personal to me was now on a very public stage with all these nurses and the nurses station looking at me, my fellow students looking at me, my clinical instructor looking at me. And what ended up happening as a result of that moment was I was actually asked to leave nursing school, and I was told that I was likely too anxious to be a safe nurse. And so I really had to decide for myself in that moment. And it was one of the first really big, pivotal moments in my mental health journey of do I advocate for myself? Do I stay in this program? I had a panic attack because I was being yelled at by an instructor. I don't think that was a situation that should have happened. And how am I going to be able to move forward in a program that doesn't want me here, but I want to be here and I want to be a nurse and I want to continue on this path? And so, because I advocated for myself in that moment, and because I eventually went on to pass that class and graduate at the top of my nursing program and all these different things, that led to me one day becoming a nursing educator and then eventually creating this business called SMNP, which was essentially a test prep business for nurse practitioners that actually really just centered around mental health. Because what I often told people, and I still tell people, is if you can graduate a big program like that, like a nurse practitioner program, you can absolutely pass the test, but you have to be able to manage your mind to do that. And so, was I teaching content? Yes. But was I really I was teaching mental health tools and helping them create a toolbox for themselves of when I get into this big high stakes situation, because this exam feels a little bit life or death because I can't practice and I can't be a nurse practitioner unless I pass. How do I best manage myself in that moment to be able to pass and use the knowledge that I have? And so I feel like been doing advocacy work for a long time. It really started with myself, and then it turned into advocating for my students and for who were eventually became my colleagues because they became nurse practitioners, and then has now pivoted into advocating for not only my daughter, but also those like her who have congenital heart disease and are born with heart defects. Is if people hear nothing else from this episode, the one thing I always want them to hear is that congenital heart defects, they're the most common birth defect. They're 1 in 100, but they're one of the absolute least funded. And so as a result of that, that's what I'm trying to change today.
Just a little bit about that, because a lot of people probably won't know what that actually means.
So, when you have congenital heart disease, it means that you are born with a birth defect that specifically affects your heart. Now, this can look like a variety of different things. There are plenty of children out there who are born with a congenital heart defect but don't require surgery, for example. So, they might have a hole that will eventually close one day on its own.
It's the common one. Yeah.
Yes, that's common. Yes. And sometimes things are just a little bit rerouted, and maybe you might have to have one surgery and it's a one and done. My daughter's case is different. They actually consider her care to be palliative care. And so it just means that it sustains her until she can get to her next surgery. And so she herself was born with 4 different heart defects, some of which are holes, some things are missing, some are reroutes. And so She had her first heart surgery at 6 days old. She went on to have another massive heart surgery at 4 months old, and her lingering piece today, she has an artificial heart valve, and so every time she grows bigger, she outgrows her valve, and so she
Right.
has to have open heart surgery again to have it replaced.
How old's your daughter?
She turned 3 a month ago.
3.
Yes, she's wild in the best way.
Absolutely. She's extremely brave. I mean, how as parents do you get your head around that? Do you deal with that? Because you can't avoid it. It's unavoidable, but your parents, you've newborn baby, and then you've got to deal with this. How do you even comprehend?
It was one of the scariest moments of our life. Now, as I said earlier, like, I'm used to advocating. I'm very comfortable in
Yeah,
that role. I know how that works. And so it was kind of a nice fit for me to be like, okay, like, I know how to advocate for you, but not only that, like, I have the medical expertise to back this up. And
yeah.
I think for us, what was the hardest was I actually switched OBs in my 3rd trimester because I was in my 2nd trimester, and I very, like, clearly remember looking at my husband one day when we were leaving an OB appointment, and I was like, "You know what? If anything goes wrong during the birth, that OB is just not the human that I want beside me. Like, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel like there's a trust there, so I would rather switch OBs and start fresh and hope to have a better rapport and a better relationship and someone that can maybe help me manage my mental health a little bit better because I was having a lot of anxiety about having my daughter. And so we actually incidentally and accidentally found out when I was 36 weeks pregnant that she was going to be sick. So we went my entire pregnancy thinking we had a normal, healthy, happy 1-day baby to then finding out, okay, you're going to give birth in 3 weeks and we're going to induce you on the heart surgeon schedule. And you're going to have a baby that's going to have a heart surgery in their first week of life. But not only that, a lifetime of heart surgeries. And so for us, it
Life
was this
lifetime of heart surgery.
yes, because every time she grows bigger, it has to be replaced. And so
So would it
when they
be like?
replaced it,
Would there be like? Would it be like to age of like 18 or 21?
no, unfortunately, so what happens is she grows bigger, she gets them replaced, but then when she is like a steady, stable adult size, over time, they will just go bad. So she'll need them replaced, it just won't be as frequently. But it'll
Right.
depend on like her exercise tolerance and the symptoms she's feeling. It's very subjective to her, which is very hard for me having OCD because for anyone out there
Yeah.
that doesn't have a clear picture of OCD, it's really just like this intolerance of uncertainty. And I feel like I live the most massive, extreme version of uncertainty all the time because we never know exactly when her next surgery is gonna be. It, like, really could be anytime.
How do you cope with that?
Well, after we made it through the bulk of her initial surgeries, because by the time she was 6 months old, she had had 2 heart surgeries, but she had had 4 other surgeries. I really had to figure out, okay, like, what's going on with me? What's going on with my brain? What is happening right now? Because I was having massive, massive anxiety that just didn't feel like generalized anxiety. And it really didn't even feel totally like PTSD. Like I was familiar with both of those realms. And that was actually when I got my diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder. You know, everything after she was born was just about surviving in that moment and making it through her surgeries and hoping that she survived those surgeries. But then when I had a time to really like stop, pause, be at home and really work on myself, I ended up deciding to do an outpatient intensive program for OCD after getting my diagnosis, where I did 4 to 5 hours of therapy every day for nearly a month. And it was just,
5 hours.
yeah, but
I'm
that's
used to
how severe my
clients.
OCD symptoms were. So
I was gonna say I'm used to clients coming to me once a week.
yeah, the OCD scale, if I remember correctly, it's like
Yeah.
0 to 40. I think when I first took it, like, it was literally the week after we got out of the hospital, I scored a 38. Like, I was having massive symptoms impacting my daily life
But I mean, anyone that's not got OCD is gonna be at the top of any scale if they've got a son
after
or daughter.
surviving that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How was the therapy for you? Did it work? Because I mean, sometimes you got people that they're just so overwhelmed. Therapy's not going to work because they just got too much going on. They can't focus. How are you managing to maintain focus? Your daughter's in the hospital, heart surgery, stressed husband, and you're having 4 to 5 hours therapy trying to deal with a new diagnosis. How did you manage that?
Well, that was why I purposely did it when she was out of the hospital. I was like, "Okay, she's steady, she's stable, she is in a good spot
Right.
according to cardiology and everyone else." And so I remember telling my husband, I was like, "I feel like I need to do this as soon as possible because I can barely sleep. I feel like I can't eat. Like, I can't show up as a human. I also can't show up as a mom. I can't show up as the wife I wanna be." And so, like, I know we both have our own stuff going on, but I really I have to do this in this moment because at the same time, like, not only am we are just getting out of the hospital and, like, reintegrating into real life, like, right before we found out Meadows' diagnosis was when I sold my company, and so I'm also going back into an executive corporate role at a company, and I've just given up my company essentially. I mean, I sold it, it was a good thing,
Yeah,
but that's kind of its own grief and navigation process of being an entrepreneur to becoming an employee again, and what does that look like, and in a high stakes role too. So I was like, I really have to get my brain in check and do this exposure therapy, and it worked beautifully for me. I mean, I think by the time I finished that intensive program, I went to like a 13 on the scale, which is mild. And so
yeah,
it was a really big jump for me. And it was a really, honestly, I felt like the best part of getting the diagnosis is I've always had OCD. I just didn't have a name for it.
yeah,
And living through that experience with my daughter obviously amplified it. I can look back throughout my entire life now and see these OCD flavors and behaviors. But having the name and knowing what to do to manage it, because for OCD, like you have to like face the fear head on and realize that you don't die. I mean, that's what I tell people all the time. Like, you just do the thing and you realize, like, okay, I survived this terrible, scary thing. And cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't necessarily work for an OCD brain, or at least not the OCD behaviors.
yeah, yeah. What was the actual therapy that you think really worked for you? Because
For
if
me,
you
it
have,
was the exposures.
yeah,
And to just be like really graphic and really honest, obviously, I was having tons and tons and tons of anxiety of like, if I don't do this, my daughter will die.
yeah,
And for me, I had this really it was really terrible timing. And sometimes my therapist says this thing about, 1 in a million tries, OCD will get it right. But throughout my entire pregnancy, I was kind of doing these magical thinking behaviors. And so I was like, if I have a baby shower, something's going to happen to the baby, or if I announce my pregnancy, something's going to happen. And so I didn't tell anyone that I was pregnant outside of immediate family until I was 34 weeks. And I didn't have a
mm,
baby shower, and someone threw me a surprise baby shower. And then all of a sudden, we find out Meadow is sick. And so in my brain, I'm like, oh, I caused this. This is my fault. And so when I was doing finally kind of like towards the end of my intensive therapy, we were kind of getting to like the scariest of scariest exposures and the things that I really don't want to do, but I know I have to do. I ended up we online, there are these tombstone generators. And so I actually made a fake tombstone for my daughter as if she had died because of one of my behaviors. And
right,
that's why I talk about facing your fears head on and realizing you don't
yeah,
die. And obviously I did that. And that was now years ago. And she's okay. Like she's a thriving 3-year old today. But that being said, that was really incredibly painful and really hard. But it was so good for my OCD brain to be like, I did this scary thing and I actually don't have responsibility for this event at all. And, at the end of the day, OCD is an intolerance of uncertainty, and there's nothing and a doing nothing that is certain in this world. Even the things you think are 100% certain are still not certain. And so certainty is honestly just an illusion.
yeah. How many times are we expecting something to happen? Could be anything, and it doesn't happen. You're like, well, I thought that was dead
Mm-hmm.
cert there as well. And with your daughter, I'm kind of guessing it's just one of those things, that 1 in a million or
It
whatever.
is a fluke thing. We have done all the genetic testing that is available to us. We have had so many deep discussions with our cardiologist because, then it becomes a future family planning discussions too, because will we have another child with a heart defect? Because like if that's our fate, like we won't have more children, for example.
Yeah,
But no one in our family has had a child with a heart defect prior to this, and all of her genetics came back clean, and so did mine. And so we really hope it's just a fluke, but it's still really scary and intimidating. And of course, there's no certainty around what that looks like.
of course. How do you deal with your OCD on a daily basis? Because I'd imagine you have to stay consistent, stay routine.
Consistent.
Yeah,
Um, I tell people all the time it's really important distinction with OCD that I'm recovering from OCD, but I'm not recovered. And I don't ever feel like I'll be recovered. Like it's never just like the switch goes off one day and I don't have this anymore. So I always have to have a little bit of a radar for it. And so a lot of times I'll do preemptive exposures and I'll make myself do things. I mean, not as extreme as a tombstone generator, for example,
Yeah.
But I'll do little things when I notice that I'm, like, picking up behaviors and I'm getting closer to relapsing from my OCD to try to combat that, and that's just kind of an undercurrent of my day to day. Like, for example, last week, I got some bad news about something, and I was, like, really an OCD behavior is reassurance seeking, and so, like, you ask the same question over and over trying to get that reassurance and bring down
Yeah.
that anxiety, and I found myself starting to do that with my husband, so I just had to tell him, like, "Hey, I'm having a bad OCD day. I really want to reassurance seek in this moment. I need you to not give that to me, even though I know that's what you want to give me because I'm having a bad day and this is bad news and those sorts of things." But just really being aware, but I also continue to do OCD therapy. So every other week, I continue to meet with my OCD therapist, even if I'm not ranking on the OCD scale at
Yeah.
all, just to check in, hold myself accountable because if I'm not doing the compulsions, I haven't relapsed, and if we can catch it before it gets to that point, then I'm doing good.
Is it something that you think you'll have to have therapy forever for, even just to be consistent, that consistency?
I think for me, therapy is kind of a journey of my life. I
Yeah.
don't like see a defined stopping point. I do see like there's like different seasons for different therapists and different
Yeah.
things you want to work on. You know, for example, leading up to like the whole thing with my daughter and finding out how OCD, et cetera, I'd worked with a trauma therapist for 5 years before that. And so like that was my season for that. And I might come back to that one day if things are starting to resurface for me. So I definitely think therapy is the long-term game for me. I don't know if it'll necessarily always be with an OCD therapist, but I know we'll always be with an OCD informed therapist or an aware therapist because it's so easy with someone who doesn't know much about the disorder to reassurance seek and get that reassurance and those sorts of things, which is what I love about having an OCD therapist because she can like catch me in the behaviors sometimes before I can even catch myself. Relapses are when you're doing the compulsions.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have a lot, and I do mean a lot of anxiety about my daughter's health. Naturally, we never know when her
Cool.
next surgery is going to be, what this going to look like, and just the subjective nature of like it's based on her and how she feels. And like she's 3 years old today, she can't necessarily be like my chest hurts or like I feel short of breath or like any of those like clinical terms that my brain wants to be able to articulate. And so a relapse in that direction might be like I see her have a weird or fluke symptom and I go to Google and I spend 3 hours Googling about that and compulsively searching, trying to find reassurance of like, "Oh, no, she's good." But the thing about OCD that's, like, so painful, it's this very, like, insatiable cycle, and so you go, you get your reassurance, you feel good for a moment, but maybe next time you have to search for 5 hours instead. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example. Like, it just
Yeah.
keeps building, and you keep having to do it more and more and more, but you're not actually getting rid of that anxiety.
Yeah, you just enhance that.
Just enhance.
How do you stop it from growing, from catastrophizing?
It's all the exposure, so it's like, you know, maybe Meadow's heart is it's time for surgery again, or maybe it's not. You know, just sitting really, like, sitting in that uncertainty of, like, it could be, it could not be, but I don't know the answer. Also, like, remembering all the time, like, is it my job to be aware of Meadow? Yes, but, like, ultimately, I'm not the sole human responsible for her surgery schedule or what that next day looks like or those sorts of things. It's like, yes, I have to be aware and cognizant, but finding kind of that gray area. I think that's one of the other hard parts about OCD is you get into like this all or nothing thinking all the time. And you're like, it has to be me and I have to be the one to figure it out and I have to do this. And like, there's so much gray area.
I'd imagine it must be hard just because one, you're a mum and you want to make sure that your daughter's okay and it's your job, even if it's not realistic there. Plus you've got the OCD. I mean, that's a lot to deal with.
A lot to manage. It's definitely
Yeah.
a lot to manage.
How do you actually manage to overcome that? Or do you try and deal with it before it gets to that catastrophizing stage as quick as you can? Do you see the signs early on?
Definitely
Right.
see the signs early on because, like, you know, like last week with the situation with my husband, if I had reassurance seek and he had like done that whole loop with me, then it would be much easier when I'm feeling anxiety this week about something to get into that loop again and do it bigger. I think a lot for me really boils down to remembering. I know this sounds like so silly and so artificial, but I mean it so genuinely. But remembering that I'm like a human that has hobbies and things that I enjoy and like making sure I'm filling up my time with things that
Right.
aren't just medical research, for example, or, like I have a side habit of astrology. I love astrology. It's so much fun for me, but that's a
Right.
hobby of mine and that keeps me from cycling into OCD loops. And so remembering to like have joy, have fun, be present as a mom, all those sorts of things also keep me out of the loops too. I don't want to say they're necessarily distractions when I forget that when I forget to just, like, be a human and have hobbies and have fun, then it gets a lot easier to get darker. A lot of people will kind of get in this loop of, like, do I get depressed and it makes my OCD worse, or did my OCD get bad and then I got depressed? And for
Yeah.
me, I very much like, I might get depressed and then my OCD is worse. So if I'm doing things to actively combat feeling depressed, then my OCD will be better.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I get clients to do. I'll say to even clients or just anyone in general, even if life's good, stay busy. Don't sit around. I've had people that's gone, Lee, I've got a week off work. All right, great. Yeah, it's all good. See them a week later, I feel really depressed. What did you do on your week off? I just sat in a chair all week. I didn't do anything.
Depressing.
Exactly. You've got to always have a busy diary. We give you, and one of the things that I get my clients to do is to be distracted, focus on something else. Because if you start ruminating, then you're asking for trouble. Yeah, yeah. Do you know where your OCD originates from? Because it can vary from where it comes from.
I've thought about this a lot just because my brain is very curious.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there is definitely a trauma component to my OCD. I think I was already a very anxious child in general because, I'm working on a memoir right now. So I really wanted to figure out where this OCD thing came from. I
Yeah.
can't be absolutely certain. But when I was a young teenager, I guess I wasn't even a teenager yet, I was 12, my grandmother died and she was kind of my safe person and my safe place and the person who took care of me when other people didn't have capacity to take care of me. And I had a lot of magical thinking thoughts about her death. Like, if I do this, she won't die. Because she ended up dying of cancer. It was a terminal illness. It took about a year and a half, but obviously, eventually, she died. And I think that really kind of like spiraled me into having more full blown OCD.
How old were you at the time?
I was 12.
12. Have this conversation is very similar to a lot of clients. And in that age range, if we can't figure out what's happened, we'll always end up trying to blame ourselves, even if it doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. It's like if I've had it where here and it's not rational, and but often because we can't figure out that something else has happened, well, must be down to me there as well. I can see where the anxiety would have originated from, so that would make sense. So you're pretty confident there where that is come from there, because for me as a therapist, I'd like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I had like other OCD behaviors. Like I was very rigid about school and like those sorts of things. But I think like that experience definitely amplified it because obviously, like your favorite human, you don't want your favorite human to die. But also, my grandmother was 70 years old and she smoked for 50 years. So her having lung cancer made a lot of logical sense.
It might not be my fault.
Might not, but can't be for sure.
Yeah, I won't take a chance there as well. How do you find yourself staying that consistent then? Because is there times where you feel yourself sliding into the OCD, or does it take somebody else like your husband to go, oh, actually, do you know what? I think you might be going, like if you've got somebody that's got like bipolar disorder, some people can see signs before that person. How does it work for you?
I think for me, I'm pretty self-aware, but one thing that me and my husband like to do with my OCD is make a joke out of it sometimes. So
Yeah.
sometimes we'll have like a conversation and he'll be like, wait, wait, wait. He's like, am I talking to your OCD or am I talking to you right now? And so we kind of give it this like third party personality.
Yeah. That must work. I think that's a really clever way. Is that something you guys come up with? Or was that something you learned in therapy to do that?
That was something I learned in my intensive outpatient program because they were like, if you can just like give a little levity to how we actually ended up with this specific skill was my husband was so afraid of giving me reassurance and it was so ingrained in our relationship. When I got my OCD diagnosis, we had been together for 8 years. And so like me seeking reassurance and him giving reassurance was like just part of our day to day. And so he was so afraid of giving me reassurance when I started this intensive program that he almost like became a mute. He was like, "I don't know how to talk to you and not give you reassurance, and that's not what you need right now." So it was like he didn't talk to me at all. But honestly, I was like, "I'm going through an intensive program right now, like, I'll need to talk." And so my therapist suggested, like, "Are there ways that you could poke fun at the OCD or poke fun at the behaviors, bring some levity to the situation, which is already, like, a natural part of your relationship, and do it that way?" And that worked really, really well for us.
Could see that because when like your husband questions, am I talking to you or your OCD? Does that mean your brain's going to check in to see, oh, actually, am I
Yeah.
saying this because of, yeah, it's the same for me because I've got CPTSD. So sometimes I will say things, react to things, and I'm like, hold on a minute. And then when I check in, and you have to, first of all, you have to be honest with yourself and then
Yeah.
admit that, yeah. So then you're like, oh, actually, do you know what? I don't know about yourself. You have to question everything where that response has come, and then whether you justify it or, do you know what? I don't even know why I said that. Now I know where I said that, but it's not actually what I mean. Do you kind of have to decipher that?
Yeah, no, I also have a diagnosis of PTSD, and that's another conversation that me and my husband have. He'll be like, "Am I talking to you right now? Or am I talking to, like, 10-year-old Sarah?" He's like, "Because I feel like we kind of jump scenarios here, and talking about it in this way right now makes me sound like I have, like, a personality disorder." It really is just like a third party coping
Yeah.
skill that helps us kind of just figure out, "Okay, where are we at in this moment, and how do we manage whatever that thing is?"
Yeah. I honestly think that's a really, really good technique that you use. And that's something I would probably take from this, and I would get clients that's in relationships to use. Many clients have got PTSD, depression, that kind of thing there. So I can imagine it can work there as well. With your partner, before you had the diagnosis, did he really struggle to deal with your OCD? Because I know with people with anxiety, the worst thing you can do is to reassure them. You have to like sit with them and go, I can see that you're stressed, can see that you're anxious. But obviously a lot of people will try and tell people it's going to be all right, don't worry, and it just makes it worse. How did that happen for you guys?
I think, like, it was such a natural and ingrained part of our relationship, we weren't even, like, fully aware what we were doing, and I think if my husband were to describe me honestly today or back then, he'd be like, "Oh, Sarah's quirky," like, "Oh, Sarah's a little obsessive." Now, OCD tends to, like, bring up and dredge up all of your, like, worst scary stuff, and a lot of people will say it's all bad all the time. I don't necessarily feel that way, even with my experiences with OCD because, like, building a business and having undiagnosed OCD in some ways was a little bit of a superpower, I felt like.
Yeah.
Like, was I very obsessive? Yes. Was I very compulsive? Yes. Did it affect my daily living? Absolutely. But I also became a millionaire in 7 months. And I definitely, like, attribute my business success to having that really obsessive personality about like how things are articulated and the details and how things are put together and all those sorts of things. But I'm very lucky and very fortunate that my husband tells me all the time, he's like, "We feel our feels." Um, I didn't necessarily grow up in a house where I felt safe to feel my feelings out loud all the time, so I love that for my daughter and for myself in the house that I live in today, that we can safely feel all of our feels in any given moment in time and my husband really welcomes that, and so I feel like he's always, like, whatever part of my mental health journey I'm on, he's just walking it with me and helping me figure it out, which I greatly appreciate. He's a really wonderful person.
He sounds like a great guy, very understanding, but I'd imagine he's pretty much an expert in OCD.
He'd have to be by now.
Yeah. But the fact that when you've got somebody that can actually help, that understands what you're going through, it makes all of the difference there. Because I've seen it with clients where a lot of their partners just don't get what they're getting. They don't understand frame of reference. They're
Mm.
looking at their point of view. They can't understand it there as well. Whereas your husband can certainly understand it from your view. He knows what he's going to get from you, and fortunately knows how to deal with it there as well, which probably was a lot of trial and error along the way for both of you there. A bit of a journey, work in progress, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I'm, like, so grateful all the time because my mother-in-law actually so his mom was the first person to ever say to me, like, therapy isn't something that she's ever gonna be done with, and so I always thought, like, you go to therapy, you fix the problem, you move on, and then to kind of, like, shift my own frame of reference to be like, "No, therapy could be a lifelong journey, and I'm
Yeah.
always working to improve myself," and that's really cool, but for him to grow up in a house like that and hear things like that and really ingrain things like that, and just even have that level of exposure makes a lot of sense that we ended
Yeah.
up in a relationship together.
Yeah. I think that's pretty lucky that is
It's
there.
very
'Cause,
cool.
yeah, because the odds of that Probably fairly remote, really.
Especially in Kentucky.
And with yourself, so you made 1 million in 7 months, which is pretty amazing going. Tell us a little bit about that. What got you started on that? How did you get the concept together and start building it? And how come it grew so rapidly?
Yeah, so during COVID, I was graduating nurse practitioner school and I was having massive, massive anxiety about taking the exam because not only is it a high stakes exam, like if you don't pass, you don't get to practice and you've wasted all this money and time in school, which for me was years of my life that I just spent in school. The other part was it was during COVID. And so like you would sign up to take the test, you'd show up to the testing center and they would be closed. And like so you wouldn't get an email, you wouldn't get a phone call, like you would just show up prepared to take this thing and then it would be closed. So that happened to me 4 or 5 different times where I like geared up to take this exam and then I didn't get to actually take the exam. And I was like so stressed and so frazzled. I ended up breaking a tooth. I had to have a dental implant. Like I was having
Yeah.
big, big anxiety. But when I finally got to take this silly exam, it was one of the easiest exams I'd ever taken. And I felt massively over prepared. And I remember very clearly like sitting in the parking lot because me and a friend were taking it together and she was behind me, thinking like, wow, I spent thousands of dollars preparing for that when I didn't need to. I broke a tooth, I didn't need to. Like, I really like, I knew the content, I just had to manage my anxiety. I just kept thinking, like, I just had to manage my anxiety, and I was sitting in the parking lot after just passing the exam when I first had the idea of, like, "Well, maybe I'll make my own course." Like, there's these people, they're putting out courses on Facebook, I know mine would be better because. I'm fresh off this whole experience of having taken the exam and studied for it, and I know what I want and what I was looking for, and I was really looking for mental health stuff. And so I spent about 3 days making the first version of the course. It was just 3 hours on Zoom. And instead of like me lecturing at you, it was me having a conversation, even though there was like nobody on the other side of the screen. I would just be like, instead of being like, blood pressure is 120/80, I would be like, this patient comes in, their blood pressure is this. What do you think? And pause and let you have a moment to digest that and think about what your answer would be. And then I would walk you through the scenario and I'd walk you through the anxiety tools I would use if I got flustered by that question. And there just wasn't really anything like that in the market at the time. And so I gave it to the first 100 people that joined my Facebook group for free, which everybody was online at that time because it was COVID. Like nobody was
Yeah.
out of their houses still. And the first day I went to sell it, I sold it for $15 for lifetime access to this 3-hour course, but I made $1,000 in a day. But I think in hearing that, there was such a massive gap in the market for someone to be able to come in and immediately make $1,000 in a day and gather that many people that quickly. There were a lot of reviews at the time that literally would just be like, test anxiety doesn't exist. And if you fail, it's on you. And like that only fed to my pandemonium as I prepared. And so it was really cool to have someone come in who is relatable, a little bit younger. I mean, I was 25 at the time, which was crazy, and be like, this is what I did. Let me help you. Like, let me show you the way. And it just exploded past my wildest dreams.
Yeah. I mean, what are you thinking when you're just seeing so many people signing up for it? You thinking this, what's going on?
I'll be honest, I got panicked. I was like, this is so many messages to try to get through. I, like, threw my phone across the room because people are just like, "Boom, boom, boom, I want it, I want it, I want it," which was really cool. But I it was such a gift, like, to have a part of my legacy be helping people better manage their mental health, like, that is so cool for me. Like, even though I've sold the business, I'm separate from it now, all the things, like, having my legacy wrapped up in that is a really cool experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. One great business idea, gap in the market, which everyone's always searching for, but also you're going to help people. And it does exist because I can't stand tests. Give me
Oh, I
coursework.
hate tech. Let me write a paper all day long, like
It's soon I could be studying for something and I know my stuff, and then as soon as there's a test, panic,
oop.
overwhelm, yeah, and
Uh-huh.
it's just fun. And I've sat there in tests before, ones that I know that I can do, and I've just frozen. I'm like, I'm not even going to recover from this. I
I
just know.
know.
So yeah, so if somebody can give me a course, however much that's going to get me through an exam, I'm going to pay for it because I would have invested time, effort, money, and it's just that final thing.
That one last little piece.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, how much would somebody pay for that? I think for me, if I lucky enough, it was coursework, but when I qualified to be a therapist, I'd love to know how much I would have paid to take a
Mhm.
course to get me through an exam if I needed. It would have been probably a lot there as well because it means so much. invested time, effort, and money there. So I think that's genius. What made you sell your business? You got a booming business, making loads of money, to sell it, an offer you couldn't refuse, or you wanted to do something?
Well, I get bored easily. I'm not gonna lie. It's just like me
Is
as a
that the
human.
OC?
Yeah, I do have OCD. I like a little bit of variety in my life. I wasn't necessarily bored yet, but I knew. I was like, this business is on the up and up. And I don't know how long this upride lasts. Like we've been on this rocket ship for about 2 years. It has blown past my wildest dreams, but like how long before it plateaus, right? And so I'm like starting to have this conversation because you want to sell when you're on the up, not when you're on the
Yes.
plateau.
Yes.
Because you're gonna get valued less. And I wanted to, just to be really blunt, create some more certainty in my life because being an entrepreneur feels very uncertain. And I was, like, so excited, and I still am, by the idea of, like, generational wealth and, like, my family being taken care of and my daughter being taken care of and having money to do the kind of things that we wanna do. Like, for example, after we sold the business, we ended up doing a $15 million legacy gift to our local children's hospital, and they actually, like, named a unit after our family and our daughter, and, like, we do a lot of support there for, like, cardiac innovation and research, like, doing philanthropy work and doing those sorts of things, like, I get to do as a result of selling my business, so for me, it felt like the next right move, and then I was like, once I sell, I'll have more time to focus on being a mom. Not that that was the reason I sold, but it was just like that was an added benefit, but also to see what else lights me up and do I wanna create another business, and what else does this look like in the future, and so I don't it's been a couple years since I sold, I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I have really enjoyed the advocacy work and the philanthropy work that I've been able to do as a result.
What do you reckon's next for you?
What's next for me?
Is
My
it
memoir.
one thing in your mind, or have you got several things that I could do this, I could do that? How do you work?
So, I would say for right now, I'm working on my memoir. I'm also
Yeah.
working on children's books about congenital heart defects, and I'm in the process. I'm just about, hopefully, to self-publish one of those books. I'm working with an illustrator right now. We're, like, finishing the final touches. 'Cause there's not a lot of representation of heart defects in children's books for it to be such a widely,
No.
known condition. Outside of that, I'm really actually, like, super enjoying being a mom. I feel like
Is this the first time that you can go, I can actually enjoy being a mum? You know what you're up against. It's settled down. You can actually enjoy it. How long ago do you think it was before you actually gone, yeah, do you know what? I can enjoy being a mum now. How long's that been, do you think?
I really would say it's been the last year and a half. Because even though we got out of the hospital when she was 6 months old, I felt like I was just always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I'm like, "Is she actually okay? Like, are we actually gonna get some gap time before her next surgery?" Like, I just need to have the lived experience of living a normal day to day and feeling like we were normal, even though we're kinda not normal. But especially in this last year and a half, like, the closer she's gotten to 3 and being her own little human, like, I really in so many ways, I feel like she's such a normal kid, which is so
Yeah.
fun for me to see. Because I was really when you go through an experience like that as an infant, there are all these open doors of questions about, like, developmentally, how will she shake out? Will she be behind? Will she be behind physically? Like, all these different things mentally, but most people that look at Meadow have no idea that she's had 6 surgeries already or that she'll have more surgeries, and I think I always thought I would enjoy being a mom, but I've really, really, really enjoyed it. Like, I've just had so much fun with her.
Yeah, yeah, it's like making up for lost time, just maximizing it, the gratitude, that everything, times at 100. So it's great that you and your husband can enjoy your daughter, relax, and you're at a place where you know what you're up against and how to deal with it there as well. So it all sounds great, and there's so many things that you're doing. It all sounds brilliant there as well, beneficial to other people there, and obviously very entrepreneurial as well. I think when your book comes out, that's going to be a really interesting read. And there's going to be so many people, which the whole point of the podcast is, that are going to be able to relate to your story, even if it's not like for like, but they're,
Mm.
just having their
Pieces.
child ill, going into the hospital there, or the OCD, and the fact that they're going to feel inspired because of what you've gone on to achieve. And in such a short space of time, it's just brilliant there.
It is, but I'm only 31. I have to, like, remind myself of that sometimes.
I think you should give yourself a lot of credit there as well. So I think it's just an absolutely amazing story there. I think you got amazing strength there, and to deal with what you deal with consistently, because it's not like something, yeah, I dealt with that years ago and now we're on. Well, you have to maintain and deal with
all
all
the
of the
time.
got there. So that takes a lot there as well. So I really admire you for that. It's been brilliant talking to you, Sarah. Absolutely
You.
love you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and let me talk for so long because I do love to talk.
Same here.